In the smoke-filled trenches of World War I and the brutal island battles of World War II, German soldiers whispered about a weapon that didn't roar like artillery or scream like bombs, but terrified them more than both. It wasn't a tank, it wasn't a flamethrower. It was an American shotgun. At close range, it ended fights instantly. In the dark, in the mud, in seconds. So feared that Germany officially protested its use, calling it inhumane. But what was the real reason Germans dreaded American shotguns? The answer reveals a chilling truth about modern warfare. Before we dive in, like this video, subscribe to the channel for cinematic war documentaries, and comment below where you're watching from. Now, let's go back to the trenches. The fear did not begin with rumors, it began with bodies. In 1918, as World War I dragged into its final, blood-soaked year, American troops arrived in Europe carrying a weapon few European armies had taken seriously. The Germans had machine guns, the British had artillery, the French had experience. The Americans brought shotguns. At first, German officers dismissed them. Shotguns were hunting tools. Police weapons, farm guns. Crude, primitive. Surely no match for disciplined infantry and modern firepower. They were wrong. The Western Front was not an open battlefield. It was a maze of trenches. Narrow, dark, wet corridors filled with rats, fear, and sudden death. Engagements happened at arm's length. Visibility was measured in feet, not fields. And in that environment, the American trench shotgun was devastating. Unlike bolt-action rifles that required precise aim and time to cycle, the shotgun delivered overwhelming force in a single trigger pull. Buckshot spread through confined spaces, ricocheting off trench walls, striking multiple targets almost instantly. A German patrol rounding a corner could be wiped out before the first man hit the ground. Survivors told stories of comrades collapsing with catastrophic wounds, injuries that looked nothing like rifle hits, limbs shredded, bodies torn open. Men dropped before they could scream. This wasn't just death. It was sudden, violent, and psychologically crushing. The weapon at the center of this fear was the Winchester Model 1897, a pump-action shotgun modified for war. Fitted with a bayonet lug and heat shield, it allowed American soldiers to fire, rack, and fire again, with terrifying speed. In trained hands, it could clear an enemy trench faster than grenades, and, without warning, German soldiers soon learned to recognize the sound. Not the blast, but the pump. That mechanical clack-clack echoing through a trench meant death was seconds away. Fear spreads faster than bullets in war. And by mid-1918, fear had a name. The Germans called it brutal. They called it unfair. They called it illegal. In September 1918, the German government issued a formal diplomatic protest, accusing the United States of violating the laws of war by using shotguns. They argued that the wounds caused were unnecessarily cruel and demanded that American soldiers captured with shotguns be executed. The U.S. response was cold and confident. American military lawyers stated that the shotgun was a lawful infantry weapon, no more inhumane than machine guns or artillery, which caused far worse suffering on a massive scale. The protest was ignored, and the shotguns stayed. But here's the truth that made Germans dread the weapon even more. The fear had little to do with legality. It had everything to do with control. Shotguns took away the illusion of distance. They erased reaction time. They turned trench warfare into something deeply personal. German doctrine relied on discipline, formations, and coordinated movement. The shotgun shattered that structure in close combat. It punished hesitation. It favored aggression. It gave young American soldiers, many with hunting backgrounds, a terrifying edge. When World War I ended, the fear didn't disappear. It went underground. 2 decades later, when World War II erupted, American forces once again carried shotguns, this time into jungles, caves, and night patrols. And German soldiers remembered. The weapon that made trenches deadly would soon make forests and bunkers just as unforgiving. But the real reason Germans feared American shotguns That reason would fully reveal itself in the next war. When World War II erupted, warfare had changed, but fear had not. The Germans had faster tanks, deadlier aircraft, and battle-hardened divisions. Yet when American forces entered the war, German soldiers began hearing familiar stories again. Stories from fathers, from veterans of the trenches, from men who remembered 1918. Stories about the shotgun. This time the battlefield was different. Instead of muddy trenches, combat unfolded in dense forests, shattered cities, and moonless nights. Visibility was poor, distances were short, and once again, close combat ruled. American units reintroduced shotguns, not as primary weapons, but as specialized tools. Trench guns returned in updated forms, riot shotguns. Short-barreled, fast-handling, devastating at close range. They were issued to point men, military police, raiders, and night patrols. And nowhere did they have more impact than in darkness. Night combat was psychologically exhausting. Soldiers couldn't see threats clearly. Every sound triggered fear. Every shadow felt alive. German doctrine emphasized controlled engagements and disciplined fire. Night fighting disrupted that balance, and the shotgun thrived in chaos. A single American soldier armed with a shotgun could dominate a hallway, bunker entrance, or forest trail. Buckshot didn't require pinpoint accuracy. It punished movement. It filled space. In ruined European cities, shotguns cleared stairwells and cellars. In forests, they were used for ambushes at ranges too close for rifles to react. But it wasn't just about lethality, it was about certainty. German soldiers learned that if a shotgun fired nearby, the encounter was already over. There was no warning shot, no chance to dive for cover, no time to coordinate, just impact. This created a deep psychological effect. German patrols became cautious in close terrain. They hesitated at doorways. They avoided confined spaces after dark. Fear alters behavior, and altered behavior wins battles. In some German after-action reports, American close-range weapons were described as overwhelming and demoralizing, not because they killed more, but because they removed the soldier's sense of agency. You couldn't outshoot a shotgun in a hallway. You couldn't outrun it in a trench. You couldn't think faster than it fired. And then there was the sound. Veterans on both sides remembered it vividly. Not just the blast, but the mechanical rhythm afterward. The unmistakable pump cycling the next round. That sound meant the shooter was calm, controlled, ready again. German soldiers feared not just the weapon, but the mindset behind it. American infantry culture emphasized initiative, aggression, individual decision-making. Shotguns amplified those traits. A single soldier could act decisively without waiting for orders. That terrified armies built on rigid structure. But here's the deeper truth. The shotgun symbolized something Germany couldn't counter: adaptability. While Germany invested heavily in precision weapons and complex systems, American forces embraced practicality. The shotgun wasn't elegant. It wasn't refined. It worked. It worked in rain, in mud, in darkness, in panic. And when the war shifted to places like the Pacific, jungles, caves, tunnels, the shotgun became even more feared. German observers took note. If a weapon could dominate caves in the Pacific and buildings in Europe, it represented a universal threat: close combat supremacy. By the end of World War II, the shotgun had earned a reputation far beyond its numbers. It wasn't widely issued, but it didn't need to be. Its myth did the work. German soldiers believed that Americans excelled in close combat. That belief changed how they fought. And in war, belief shapes reality. But the fear still wasn't about cruelty. It wasn't about protest notes or legality. The real reason Germans dreaded American shotguns was psychological. They represented a battlefield where preparation didn't matter, where training dissolved, where control vanished. A battlefield where survival came down to seconds. And the shotgun owned those seconds. In the final part, we'll uncover why Germany's protest backfired, how the shotgun shaped modern infantry doctrine, and why its legacy still echoes in warfare today. In the middle of a war defined by artillery barrages, poison gas, and industrial-scale slaughter, Germany made an unusual move. It complained. In September 1918, the German government sent a formal diplomatic protest to the United States, condemning the American use of shotguns on the battlefield. The language was dramatic. The tone was moral. Germany claimed that shotgun wounds were excessively cruel and violated the laws of war. The protest shocked many observers, not because of what it said, but because of who said it. This was a war where entire towns were erased by shellfire, where machine guns cut down waves of men, where gas burned lungs from the inside. Yet it was the shotgun that Germany singled out. Why? Because the protest was never really about humanitarian concern. It was about control slipping away. Germany's military doctrine was built on predictability. Infantry engagements followed patterns. Weapons behaved in expected ways. Shotguns broke that logic. They introduced unpredictability into spaces Germany believed it understood. The protest demanded that American soldiers captured with shotguns be treated as criminals rather than prisoners of war. The United States responded swiftly and decisively. American legal advisors pointed out that international law did not ban shotguns, that every major power used weapons that caused horrific injuries, and that Germany itself employed flamethrowers and gas, far more indiscriminate and painful tools. The American response ended with a quiet warning. If Germany executed captured U.S. soldiers, the United States would respond in kind. The issue vanished, but something unexpected happened. The protest amplified the shotgun's reputation. What had once been a battlefield tool now became a symbol. German soldiers heard that their own government feared the weapon enough to protest it. That knowledge traveled fast, through letters, rumors, and frontline gossip. Fear deepened. In warfare, perception matters as much as firepower. The protest confirmed what soldiers already felt, that the shotgun was something different, something outside the normal rules, and that fear lingered. By World War II, the protest had become legend. Many German soldiers believed shotguns were illegal, not because they were, but because they were effective. The myth fed the dread, but historians later uncovered something even more revealing. Medical records from World War I showed that shotgun wounds were not uniquely lethal compared to rifle or machine gun injuries. In many cases, survival rates were similar. So why did the fear persist? Because shotgun combat was intimate. Rifle fire killed from distance. Artillery killed anonymously. Shotguns killed face to face. The enemy was close enough to see, to hear, to recognize. That closeness magnified trauma. German veterans often described shotgun encounters as chaotic and overwhelming. There was no gradual escalation, no warning, just sudden violence and immediate collapse. This shaped post-war military thinking. Germany, like many nations, analyzed why certain weapons disrupted morale more than others. The lesson was uncomfortable. Psychological shock could outweigh technical superiority. Meanwhile, the United States quietly absorbed the opposite lesson. Shotguns weren't mass-issue weapons. They were force multipliers, tools that dominated specific environments: trenches, buildings, jungles, and tunnels. This thinking carried forward in Korea. In Vietnam, in modern urban warfare, shotguns remained limited in number but powerful in effect. Their role was never about range or volume. It was about certainty in chaos. And Germany's protest? It did the exact opposite of what was intended. It didn't stop the weapon. It legitimized the fear. By trying to label the shotgun as inhumane, Germany unintentionally admitted that it disrupted their soldiers at a fundamental level. It wasn't the body that broke, it was confidence. That's why the dread lasted longer than the war. Even decades later, military historians noted that German accounts of close-quarters combat often carried a distinct tone when American units were involved. Faster assaults, relentless movement, no hesitation. The shotgun had become part of a larger image, Americans as aggressive, adaptable, and dangerous up close. And that image was more powerful than any single weapon. But the story doesn't end with myth and memory. Because the legacy of the shotgun still shapes how modern armies think about fear, control, and close combat. And that brings us to the final question. If the shotgun wasn't illegal, wasn't uniquely deadly, and wasn't widely issued, why does its reputation still survive today? By the time the guns fell silent in Europe, the American shotgun had already done something rare in military history. It had outgrown its battlefield role. It became an idea. For German soldiers, the shotgun represented a kind of warfare they feared most, not because it was illegal or uniquely lethal, but because it stripped away the structure that made survival feel possible. War is terrifying, but soldiers survive it by believing in rules. Distance, not cover. Timing, training. The shotgun erased those comforts. In close combat, there was no safe distance, no time to react, no margin for error. One decisive moment replaced long exchanges of fire. That is the real secret behind the dread. The shotgun turned warfare from a system into a confrontation. German military culture valued order and predictability. Even under chaos, doctrine promised control. Shotguns introduced a fight where doctrine no longer applied. They punished hesitation, they rewarded initiative. They favored the soldier who acted first. That terrified armies built around coordination and command. And the fear was contagious. Soldiers who believed they were entering a space dominated by American close combat weapons behaved differently. They slowed down. They hesitated. They avoided confined terrain. Those small behavioral changes had real consequences. Battles are not just won by killing, but by shaping how the enemy moves, thinks, and reacts. The shotgun did that without needing to be everywhere. Its reputation went ahead of it. In the decades that followed, militaries studied this phenomenon carefully. They learned that certain weapons produce outsized psychological effects, not because of statistics, but because of how they are experienced. That lesson shaped modern doctrine. Today, shotguns remain in military inventories around the world, not as primary weapons, but as tools for specific moments: breaching, room clearing, close security. The same logic applies. When distance collapses, certainty matters. The American shotgun's legacy isn't about brutality. It's about finality. When it appears, the engagement is already decided. And that understanding has influenced far more than shotguns. Modern forces emphasize shock, speed, and aggression in close combat. Not to cause fear for fear's sake, but because fear disrupts decision-making. The Germans understood that too late. Their protest in 1918 was a signal flare, not of moral outrage, but of vulnerability. It revealed that even in industrial war, there were moments when technology and planning failed. Moments when war became personal. Those moments are what soldiers remember longest. That's why veterans didn't talk about shotguns in technical terms. They talked about how it felt to encounter them, the suddenness, the helplessness, the sound. And that is why the myth survived. Not because the shotgun was everywhere, but because when it appeared, nothing else mattered. In the end, the American shotgun didn't change the outcome of the wars by itself. But it changed the way close combat was understood. It reminded the world that no matter how advanced warfare becomes, there are still moments where human reaction, courage, and speed decide everything. Moments measured in heartbeats. And that is the real reason Germans dreaded American shotguns. Not because they were illegal, not because they were cruel, but because they made war uncomfortably human. If you enjoyed this deep dive into hidden military history, like the video, subscribe for more cinematic war documentaries, and comment below where you're watching from. History isn't just about weapons. It's about what they do to the people who face them.